some of you know, I do not like to punish the punctual, so we'll go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andi Mullin. I'm the Director of Member Mobilization at Council 93. I have a lot of different responsibilities, but one of my responsibilities is that I'm in charge of our training program. And I'll be kind of the facilitator for the workshop today. So first of all, thank you all for coming. Welcome, welcome. We're going to be talking about privatization today. Just a couple housekeeping matters. Bathrooms are out the door and to the left. There will not be a break during this workshop, so if you have to take care of your personal business, just go ahead and take care of your personal business. We also have somebody from Local 1700 filming the workshop. He's sitting right there. You're just going to be filming the front table, right?
Yes.
Okay. So if you don't want to be on camera, don't come up here. So if you sit back there, you should be filming. Circulating are a couple of attendance sheets. Please make sure you sign in on the attendance sheet. If you are certain that I already have your personal email address, because I email you all the time, you can just write, you have it. But if you don't think I have it, go ahead and give me your personal email address.
If we gave it to you yesterday, is it okay?
That's adequate, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Because, and it's good to sign up. I don't spam, right? Who gets emails from me all the time? I don't spam, right? I don't spam, but this is how you find out about future trainings. That is that list, so sign up. I think that's it for logistics, for housekeeping. So what we're going to be doing today, how many were in the staff rep workshop yesterday? Yeah, I do see some familiar faces. We're going to be using basically the same format. There's going to be a little bit of Andi doing PowerPoint, and then Andi will transform into Oprah, and there will be a panel discussion. And this is our panel. Our paneler is already up here. So, and I'll ask them some questions. Yay for the panel. I'll ask them some questions, and then we'll open golf clap. Yes, we'll open it up to questions from you all. We will finish either when there's nothing else to say or at 3:30, whichever comes sooner. Okay? Any questions or logistics? Okay. Let's go ahead and jump in then. So, great. Our agenda today is first to talk in the abstract about what an effective anti-privatization campaign might look like just generically, what do you do if you're facing a privatization threat? And then we're going to talk to folks who have recently successfully beaten back a privatization attempt. And what you'll be able to do is see how did that abstract translate into an actual real-world situation. And then there'll be questions from you all. So that's what we're going to do today. So let's jump in. If you hear something about a privatization attempt in your workplace, when should you alert your staff rep to that?
Right away.
Immediately, if not sooner. You want to alert your staff rep as soon as you hear anything, even a hint about privatization. One of the things we always experience in these campaigns, always, is, oh my God, we don't have a lot of time. So as soon as you think something might be happening, you should call your staff rep right away. So what are the clues that something might be happening? Because management doesn't usually come up to you and say, hey, Wendy, we're going to privatize your job and turn it into a crap job with no benefits. That's not usually what they say. But here are some things they do say. So they use the word outsourcing, not privatization. They hardly ever say privatization. So they use the word outsourcing. They will maybe talk about moving to a hybrid model. They're not talking about a Prius, They'll say things like the current staffing pattern isn't working for us. They might say we need to supplement our existing staff. That doesn't sound too bad, especially because you're all short-staffed, but I worry about that. And then they will immediately tell you not to worry. They will tell you, don't worry, this is only exploratory. They will imply they're not really going to do it, they're just looking into it, it's only exploratory. And they will say, and it's not a big deal because you'll be offered jobs. Like, we'll make it a provision of the contract that the existing employees will be offered jobs at the new company. So if your employer says, don't worry, what should you do?
Worry.
I would worry, yeah. And they might say the current model is unaffordable or unsustainable. So the minute you hear any hints of these things, what should you do?
Call your staff.
Call your staff rep immediately, if not sooner. The faster we get the campaign up off the ground and running, the greater chance of success we have. So, let's talk about the campaign team. So, if we've got a privatization battle, the first thing we will try to do is build a campaign team. And that campaign team will be made up of these individuals. The local president, depending on the unit, the chapter chair. So if your local, as Jason's is a big local made up of people across a whole bunch of cities and towns, you want somebody from that community who's part of that workforce. And that's usually the chapter chair. You know, there might be other people here, but normally we need at least that. And then there's a whole bunch of council staff that will be on the campaign team. Your staff rep will be essential. Often the coordinator for the region, that's the staff rep's boss. The reason for that is, like, I'm on camera. I'm just gonna say it. We take privatization fucking seriously. Like, it is serious business because, and part of the reason for that is it's contagious. It's like COVID. Like, they do it one place and then they say, oh, let's do it other places. So we take it seriously. So the staff rep and their supervisor will often be on the campaign team. The director of legislation and political action will be on the campaign team. I will be on the campaign team. I'm kind of the coordinator, the convener of the campaign team. And John Killoy from my staff will also be on the campaign team. There will maybe others, but that's the basic campaign team. And this team will meet regularly. We can meet in person, we can meet over Zoom. I will say, I've done this a couple times now over Zoom. It's very effective. This is one place I'm often like kind of down on Zoom because it's better to be in person. But for something like this, Zoom is very effective, makes it a lot more convenient for people. So that's the team. So you'll build a team, and then there will be elements to the campaign. And these are essentially the elements to the campaign. You're going to need member engagement. You're going to need some kind of solidarity strategy. We're going to need a lobbying component. We're going to need some kind of media strategy. There may or may not be an electoral strategy, depending on the situation, but we always want to look at that possibility. There will be public actions. And then if we win, there will be celebrating. So these are the elements of the campaign we'll be looking to stand up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about each of these elements. And I'm going to start with member engagement. I'm going to spend the most time on this because this is by far the most important element. We have all those council staff, a lot of people with some really good expertise, but without the members, it is difficult, if not impossible, for us to win. So I'm going to spend the most time on this. And I would say members need to be engaged at every single stage of the campaign. They need to attend and participate in events. They need to participate in lobbying of their elected officials. They don't have to do it alone. They can have guidance and coaching about that, but they've got to be they've got to have their voice in the mix. They help with media, like if we're on TV or we're on the radio or we're talking to a print reporter, we want a member there talking about their perspective. We want our members talking to the other unionized employees in the community. They're the best people to do that. We are not, because they know them and they work in that community. You know, it's a really good opportunity to get people in your chapter or your local who are not members of the union to become members of the union. One thing about a privatization attempt is it's really scary. Like, it's really scary. It really disrupts people's lives when this happens. And all of a sudden, people who maybe were like, well, I don't know, what's the point of the union? All of a sudden understand the point of the union. And so can be a really good opportunity to get your members engaged, to get them to become active members of the union. People are scared, and this is understandable. I've never been involved with one of these where people weren't scared. But it's important that that fear not turn into being paralyzed. There are things we can do. And in fact, even when we lose, and we have lost these on occasion, even when we lose, I'm telling you, it's better to go down fighting. And it's better to go down fighting for a number of reasons. One of those reasons is that if we don't go down fighting, the lesson elected officials take away is, well, they didn't care. Like, it was no big deal. And then that lesson, that those elected officials then think, oh, okay, well, let's go to the DPW now. Or the neighboring community says, well, look at they over there did it. We can do it here. It's no big deal. Nobody cares. You want to make it painful. Even if they win, you want to make it painful. And the other thing is that people feel better when they fight back. Like, even if you lose, you'll feel better if you fought back than if you just rolled over. It might not feel that way. You might be sitting there thinking, and particularly at the moment you lose, you feel kind of disappointed. But I guarantee you're going to look back and you're going to be glad you at least fought and you didn't roll over. Every time I've ever been involved in one of these fights, and I'm sure Jim, who has done even more of it, will agree with this, the members think at the beginning that they can't win. They feel hopeless about it. They think there's no way they can win. And yet, we win more of these than we lose. You can't give up hope, because even when it seems like the fix is in, I'm telling you, if you wage a smart campaign, you can really turn that around. Elected officials decide they want to do this because they think it will be painless. And the minute you make it painful, they start doing the calculus again in their minds, and they start recalculating. Do I really want to do this? You know, it's like, is this really worth it? Okay, so remembering, yeah, Wendy?
With regards to it being a good opportunity to get non-payers signed up and
Yep.
engaged, if you have a non-payer who has seniority and already and was a member and has opted out and already has a bad attitude, what is the narrative that you're going to use to incentivize them to walk? Like, if they've got seniority, they might not be on the chopping block.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
So you know, I would say they might not be in the chopping block. They might say, well, I'm fine. You know, you have to make a decision. Is that person, I mean, sometimes these folks are actually kind of toxic, and you maybe don't want them involved in the campaign. And you know, you have to make that calculus. I can't make that for you. You know, the thing I would say about, well, I have seniority, they're not going to come for me. Not if they privatize the whole department, they aren't. I mean, you know, like, and if this works, what are they going to do next? So.
I mean, I've said that when people have threatened to leave the union, and I've said, we don't want to lose anybody, you know, we can't afford to lose anybody, but you know what? Your toxicity is worth the trade-off of your dues. See ya.
Yeah. I mean,
what about seniority being a union right? Would you still have that seniority if you got privatized?
If they privatized the entire unit, it wouldn't matter that you had seniority. They eliminated your job. You can go apply to Aramark. So, you know, that situation that you're talking about is a little bit unique. I'll let you guys do the calculus. What we find normally is even people who were non-members. Now, some non-members are non-members because nobody ever asked them to join. Those people are usually very happy to join. But even if they were non-members because they like have an attitude about the union, this is an attitude adjustment opportunity. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about the solidarity strategy. So this piece of the campaign is about getting other unionized workers to help you. And there are a number of options, and not all of these options will work in every campaign, or not all of these options are right for every campaign. The campaign team will discuss who's most important, who do we want here? So that might include other AFSCME locals in the community. It might include non-AFSCME unions in the community. Oftentimes, this can be key. It might include AFSCME locals in the region. It might include the AFL Central Labor Council, the appropriate Central Labor Council, and the AFL-CIO. Generally speaking, AFSCME staff will do the outreach to other AFSCME locals in the region, to the Labor Council, and to the state Fed. But it's often the members on the ground who are most effective when it comes to reaching out to other unions in the community, and sometimes even other AFSCME members, because you all know each other, your coworkers. Did you read that? Yeah.
Just quickly,
Yeah.
and especially as we found in Barre, Vermont, private sector unions, getting them on board. 'Cause like you
Yeah,
said,
if that's,
they're the
you can
voters,
find
they're the
one,
people
yeah.
going to the ballot box. And if
Yeah.
you get them to work with you on a situation like this, it'll be.
Yeah, that can be very powerful. I mean, one of the things the campaign team will do is discuss what's the universe of possibilities, what are the ones we want to prioritize. Okay, so there's always a lobbying strategy. So, for those of you who don't know what lobbying is identifying the decision maker or decision makers, and then talking to them about the issue and trying to persuade them to your point of view. That's all lobbying is. It's not like some big scary thing. That's all it is. So we would identify who the decision maker or makers are. Sometimes it's a body. We would send them materials and meet with them. And then we will try to generate phone calls or emails from members in the community about the issue. And generally speaking, that is what will win the campaign, that particular item. We can use online petitions, we can use phone banking, we can use leafleting, we can use door knocking. The whole point of the door knocking or the leafleting, the phone banking, is to generate these emails to the decision makers so that they're hearing from people in the community about how this is not a good idea, don't do it. There's always some element of a media strategy. This is our very own handsome Jim Durkin, along with a member of Local 1700 and Duxbury.
That's a great picture.
It is a great picture.
Aside from the fact that I'm in it, but it's.
That's the best part, Jim. So we will look at both traditional media outlets and social media outlets. So one of the first questions we'll ask in the campaign team is, what's the local newspaper? I don't mean the Boston Globe, unless it's the city of Boston. I don't mean the Boston Globe. I mean the hyper-local paper that everybody in the community reads. That is a great outlet for us. Is there a local television station? These two are at a local radio station that was very effective in this campaign. One of those hyper-local radio stations. The more local, the better. Okay, we want small. We'll also look at social media outlets. There's often a community Facebook page that we can use, something that, and we'll ask the people, the members on the ground, what is on social media that everybody uses? And inevitably they say this, So this strategy, media, it raises awareness, one of my least popular phrases, in the community. But it does make people aware this is happening and starts to generate questions and opposition from the community. The other thing this does is that whoever the elected officials are who are looking at this decision, they hate it. They hate it. This causes them pain and suffering, right? And that's what we want to do. We want to cause pain and suffering, right? So this really turns up the temperature on elected officials. Remember, the more painful it is, the less likely they are to do it. There may or may not be an electoral opportunity. It really depends on the situation. So if town elections are happening in 6 weeks and there's a contested seat, you could interview the candidates, figure out if one of them is with you, endorse that candidate. If we get the Central Labor Council on board, we'll get the list from the state Fed. That means we can do a mailing in the community that is often hundreds of votes. That can be a very effective strategy. We can campaign for that person, we can do direct mail for that person. Maybe there's an election, but it's an uncontested seat. Well, we can still talk to the candidate. Maybe there's no election, but there is an election day. We can leaflet the election day, because the people who show up to vote in a small town election are exactly the kind of people who would call their board of selectmen and complain about a privatization in town. So, as I say, sometimes there's an opportunity here, sometimes there isn't, but we'll look at whether or not there is. And of course, we will do public actions, which might be a selectman or a school committee meeting, speaking during the public comment portion of that meeting, leafleting town meeting or election day, did both those things, I think, in Duxbury. Leafleting community events. One community we did lawn signs, leafleting local businesses. But then what's the point of all this leafleting? The point is to direct people to a tool that will allow them to send an email to the elected officials, right? We're generating that volume toward elected officials, making it painful. And this is often where you'll see your solidarity strategy pay off, because you'll have a public action and all these people will show up where you're like, who the hell are all those people? But they will show up to be in solidarity with you, and this is often very helpful to the membership. And the last step of the campaign is celebrating when you win. And I sort of say that as a joke. People think I say that as a joke, but I don't really mean it as a joke. I mean, this isn't just fun. Celebrating is fun. But it's also a campaign tactic, and it's really important to me because it is really important to solidify the victory in the minds of your members, and specifically to solidify the fact that they won because they fought back, right? They fought back, they engaged, they got this result. That will make them much more likely to fight back in the future. And so the celebrating includes communicating with the members, elevating the victory. So both in Council 93 publications, I so far have 100% track record of getting the IU, the International Union, to do a story on anything I ask them to do a story on. So asking the IU to do a story about it, to really elevate the victory so people solidify in their mind, okay, I thought this was hopeless, we fought back, we won. That's a really important part of the process. So let's stop there and we'll go to questions. And what we're going to talk about is the Duxbury campaign to prevent the privatization of the school custodians. But before we get to that, are there any questions about this theoretical campaign I've described?
When should you decide at a point that you're going to pick it?
So I think it like a do not cross
An
picket
informational
or an
picket.
informational picket. Okay, so I think it really depends on the campaign. I would say in Duxbury, was that the second or the third school committee meeting we went to? I would say that was a picket.
That was a picket.
Yeah, it was not a do not cross picket, but it was indoors. We lined a hallway. They had to walk this gauntlet of people yelling at them. I would say that was a picket. And I will be very honest with you. This is just my opinion. Other people may have a different opinion. In my opinion, that was the turning point of the campaign in Duxbury. So you just, I can't answer. It's the same for every group. But I will say, generally speaking, you want to escalate. Right? You don't want to start off with a picket. You want to start with something milder and easier, and you want to build over time. And you want to build to that both because it will take you time to get members engaged, and because you want to give the employer an opportunity to be reasonable, right? And then reward them for being reasonable. If they're not reasonable, then there's punishment. So, okay? Great question. Other questions? Okay. You just want to hear from our panelists, and I do not blame you one bit. So, we have our fabulous panelists. We have Diane Discuillo. Am I
Discuillo.
Discuillo. Diane is the chapter chair of the Duxbury School Custodians in Local 1700 in Duxbury. She's here with us today. We have Jim Durkin, the Council 93 Legislative and Political Director, who many of you know. And we have Jason Hook, who is the Council E-Board Sergeant at Arms and is the president of Local 1700. So I'm going to transform into Oprah. Here I am, Oprah. And Jim, I'm actually going to start with you.
all right.
So you're a longtime privatization warrior.
Yeah.
Let's put where we are today in perspective. Do you think we're going to be seeing more privatization attempts in the coming months and years? What do you know? Look at your crystal ball and tell us what you think will happen.
Well, unfortunately, if I had to predict, I'd say we probably will be seeing an uptick in these, and I'll tell you why. These things are always, despite all the things that they throw at us that Andi highlighted perfectly in the front end of this, these things are always driven by one thing, and that's reducing operating costs, primarily by getting out of the business of funding your pensions and your health care. It's not so much the wages, it's the long-term costs of not only current health care, but retiree health care as well. So they're always driven by the bottom line. And for the past many years now, we've had this consistent run, at least in Massachusetts, and I think in other states, of good revenues coming in. And just taking Massachusetts for example, when the revenues are good, that translates into more aid to cities and towns, to our school departments, into our municipal budgets. When the revenues decrease, everything gets cut back, including local aid, and even a reduction in, $500,000 to $1 million to a city or town can be enough for them to say, okay, we got to do something drastic here. Like I said, we've had a good run for a long time. At the beginning of every year, they do these things called revenue forecasts. And years ago, in another life, I worked in the state senate for the budget committee, and I was amazed when I actually sat in on some of these meetings, because I always thought they were these like real sophisticated, high-tech things, and it was kind of like people throwing dots at a dartboard in many respects. They'd have an economist in there, they'd have somebody in from the Department of Revenue, but it turns out they were pretty accurate on these things. But for the past many years, revenues have exceeded those projections. So we were doing very, very well, even during the pandemic. But we've seen that finally trail off, and the revenues are coming down. So when that happens, local aid's going to get reduced, and I think we'll probably see, unfortunately, an uptick in these things. They're not always driven by money. Sometimes they're just driven by mismanagement. I'm going to talk a little bit later about Salem, but the former mayor of Salem, who is our lieutenant governor right now, Kim Driscoll, during the peak of local aid, they got rid of their school bus drivers, and it was because they just did not want to manage the school transportation department.
And just thinking back over your many years of fighting these, how often do we win? How often do we lose? How hopeless is it?
Well, it's never hopeless, never. And I was just trying to do some quick math here and just jotting down the fights that came to memory. I'd say our batting average is about 700. We definitely win more than we lose, and I think more importantly, when we do lose, we try to salvage something out of that loss, particularly by keeping an eye on things and watching and waiting for the inevitable moment where they go bad. And then we turn that into a cautionary tale.
We pounce.
Yes. One of the best examples ever was Chelmsford, Massachusetts, where they privatized our school custodians up there. And I think we're going to talk a little bit later about media. So I'll go back to Chelmsford on that. But suffice to say, everything that could have possibly gone wrong went wrong in Chelmsford, and I loved it. I really, really did. In fact, when they got rid of the school superintendent in Chelmsford, this new guy came in, Jay Lang, who happened to be an assistant superintendent in my hometown in Lowell. And one of the first things he did was to bring it back in-house. Like 5 or 6 years later, he brought the services back in-house because he saw how bad it went.
Thanks, Jim. So Diane, let's turn to you. You're kind of the star of our show today. Thank you so much for coming to Danvers to join us. But I know people don't really know you, so let's learn a little bit about you. We know you're a school custodian in Duxbury, but tell us a little bit about your job, how long you've worked there, what do you like about it, what it's like to work in Duxbury.
So I've been second shift I just finished my 19th year. I started in 2005. What I like about it, I love working with the kids. I love seeing the kids every day. What's the other question?
What do you not like about it?
What do I not like about it? Some of the disrespect from people. Yeah, we kind of on the bottom of the scale in the school. Yeah, so we get a lot of disrespect. I mean, I've been called dustpan man, toilet jockey, stuff like that. Mop jockey. Yeah, disrespect.
So you're the chapter chair of
Sure.
your local. Tell us why you decided to get involved in your union.
I walked out of the room. Actually, I'm a fighter, so I kind of just wanted, I saw a lot of things that just went, get swept under the rug over and over and over again, and I'm a fighter. I'm always going to be a fighter, so.
This is an audience that relates, I'm
Yeah.
sure. All right, so let's start talking, Diane, about how this privatization fight unfolded. When did you first hear about the possibility?
So it was in December. I heard a couple rumblings, so I watched a school committee meeting, and I saw the superintendent ask the school committee to vote to take bids. Yeah,
Okay.
so that was the very first we heard about it.
And what did you do? What was the first thing you did?
I called John.
Okay.
John Roberts.
John Roberts is your staff rep, so that's good. How did your members find out?
I told them.
You told them. And
I
what
told them.
what was their reaction? How did people feel?
They were scared. They didn't want to cause waves. I got a lot of that. Diane, don't piss people off. You don't, But I was like, they're looking to take your job, so it's time to fight now.
Right.
So.
So I think that's a common human reaction when you're under threat. Make yourself smaller. Don't make yourself bigger. It's a totally common.
Because being nice will save your job.
Yeah, because being nice will help me. I will say this is a situation. Being nice will not help you.
No.
Will not help you. And then one more question for you right now, Diane. How would you characterize your chapter prior to this incident? There are 21 people in your chapter. Were there any non-payers? Were people active and engaged? What was it like?
Some non-payers. The same people were active and engaged, but we had quite a few that, no, they didn't want any part.
Right.
They just wanted.
So typical, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, Jason, let's hear a little bit about you. We know you're the Council 93 Sergeant at Arms. We know you're president of Local 1700. But you don't work in Duxbury. Where do you work?
I
What
do not. I work for the town of Hanover as a custodian for the last 15 years.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And you're in the schools, right?
I was in the schools. I'm now I actually drive between two buildings.
Okay.
I work 5 a.m. to 1, and I'm kind of in charge of a senior center and what would be considered like the school's corporate offices. It's an older, 100-something-year-old building where like the superintendent and payroll is out of.
Okay,
so
so
it's a
now
little,
you're on the town side.
I'm on the town side now, but I was in the schools. I've worked every shift, every building, nights, days. I've done a little bit of everything.
Okay, so you knew this job.
Oh, I
You
100% understand
understood
custodians
these
in
people.
towns like Duxbury.
Yep. So I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Diane. Why did you choose to get involved in your union?
Well, so I got hired in 2009, and I just got laid off from a factory. and I started working, and it was like, this is gonna make a little bit of money, like kind of like the guy from Days of Confused, make a little bit of money, it's a town job, and then I'm gonna like, go have fun. And then I realized, I'm like, my dad also worked for the town as well for a long time. He was a custodian as well. And I was like, it's pretty good money. Like I like, the way the perks and the way it works. And I'm like, and I was 27, and my board and my my e-board at the time, which I joined shortly after, and my steward was older, and they were on their way out, and I'm like, I gotta make this work. I'm gonna be here for a long time, and if I can be involved and make it work for me and make it work for everyone around me, why wouldn't I?
I've been asking people this question all weekend long,
Yeah.
and I get one of two answers. Either I'm a fighter, or, well, nobody else was gonna do it, so I stepped in and did it. I'm sure like this room is full of people in one of those two camps. So Jason, prior to this incident, did you have any experience with privatization? Did you have a clear idea of what it would mean to privatize these jobs?
I kind of did, the town I live in now is in my local, but before my involvement, they privatized it was pretty swift from my understanding, but I get the idea, but also, I'm just thinking about, I do the job, I've been a custodian. Before all the things they said, I'm a custodian, I work 5 days, 40 plus hours a week, so I understand that the money and the work and the involvement in the town and the involvement with staff is huge. And Duxbury and the town I work for, Hanover, kind of mirror each other in, the attitudes of the general public in the town and what it is. So I'm like, if Duxbury can do it, Hanover can do it without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, and you can ask my wife, she says I have ODD, oppositional defiance disorder. So the minute I saw that, I'm like, nah, I'm gonna do everything I can to make this not happen. Yeah. Yeah.
And finally, Jason, tell us a little bit about your local and how it's structured, and did that make it harder or easier for you to fight this?
So it's a little bit of both. So my local is 14 towns, right? It's 14 or 15 towns. I always mix it up.
Last one was about 17 with 41 contracts.
Yeah. So it's like 800 plus members. We have multiple. Basically, what I like to tell everyone is we are the South Shore, and we represent anyone who is not the big three: cop, teacher, firefighter. So we have everything from cafeteria workers to secretaries to paraprofessionals, a custodian, DPW, basically any other job that's not the big three, which always people talk about. And it's interesting because I did a reach out, and I like to surround my board. I have a few members of my board in here with me, so I'll speak nicely. No, I'm just kidding. But I like to surround myself with people I know I can give a shout out and a call and go, hey, this is going on, let's go. Like we all live in the general area, and we understand that it matters. It matters. So you show up. I expect my guys to show up. I don't think I need to argue with them and twist arms for them to show up.
Okay.
But it's hard to reach people in general because we're so spread out.
And it's different employers and different contracts.
Yeah, different hour shifts,
the
days.
The folks who are members of Local 1700, you guys want to wave? So I do just want to say they were at everything. None of them work in Duxbury, and they were at everything. So Jim, let's come back to you and talk a little bit about about media and privatization. So in this campaign, you did print media, you did some radio media, and we did some social media. Broadly speaking, do you find that the media tends to cover this issue? Is it hard to get media attention on this?
It's usually a very easy sell, particularly when you're dealing with the local newspapers, because a lot of them are starving for news these days. They're short-staffed, like everybody else. They're consolidating, and I like the local media anyway, because even if you were able to get a hit like in the Boston Globe or something, it's going to be a one-off, and that's it. The local media is going to follow
They'll
this,
follow it, yeah.
and it's essential, really, because it doesn't matter how much leafleting you do, how many standouts you do, things like that. You can't reach everybody that you need to reach. So when you're trying to build public support and trying to generate calls to the decision makers, you need the media. And I just, because I want to mention this because it's a perfect example of this team effort in Duxbury. I had done stuff on WATD years and years ago.
That's a local radio station.
Yes, that's
right?
the shot you all saw up there. It stands for At the Dump, by the way, because their tower is
At the
on
dump.
a landfill. That's how they got their call letters,
Yeah.
WATD.
Oh my God,
but Jason brought it up
Yeah.
as
That
a
was
station,
Jason's
and it's
idea.
actually, it's a local station, but it's got a powerful signal. It's an FM station, and you can actually hear it just outside of Boston. And we went in and we did the morning show. It was 10 minutes, and just raised every potential problem, pitfall. We talked about Chelmsford in great detail, what happened up there. And I think that interview was kind of the turning point, really, in getting the town to stand up and take notice. Plus, it was a lot of fun, too.
Yeah. Can I
Jim is not mentioning that he trolled the
He
superintendent.
did troll the superintendent, yeah.
It was extremely funny.
It was.
And you just knew she was listening.
Oh, yeah.
This is the best part.
I was told they were all around
All
the table,
That's right,
listening,
yeah.
they were all
Yeah, but they
there.
couldn't make the meeting. They
Yeah.
couldn't do the interview because they were busy.
Yeah, so not to cut off Jim, but I just want to say something about this radio station is in the area, you will hear this station in every coffee shop, gas station, dentist office, people working in garages, people that, like, you hear, and they cover, like, I mean, they tell you what the traffic is in Cohasset, I mean, come on. But I got feedback from staff in the town 3 towns away that heard the interview, or heard about the interview, because it's that localized. Like, people listen to this radio station. And I knew if we get them on, I'm like, this is gonna shoot across, like, cause it's online too, so people can, you can save it for later. Like, you could read, like, it was
Yeah.
very well received.
It was ideal, really.
Yeah.
So, Jim, as residents of a community start to find out about a privatization attempt, like through media or whatever, how do they react? I mean, Duxbury is a pretty conservative community relative to other communities in Massachusetts. Do you find that this is a strong partisan issue, such that a conservative community likes privatization and a progressive community doesn't? What do you find?
I don't think it's a partisan issue, but I do think what we try to stress first, because the nature of people is what's in it for me, right? To us, to the union, and to me personally, the most heartbreaking thing of all these is people losing their jobs, losing their pension, losing their health insurance coverage, and then being asked as though it's a favor to you to come back and do the same damn job you've been doing for 20 years without those benefits and a 20 to 30% reduction in pay. But unfortunately, that's not what resonates with the public first. I think it does come into play, but I think, particularly when you're dealing with schools, when you start saying things like you're gonna have this revolving pool of strangers coming in and out of your schools on a daily basis, replacing the dedicated, trusted custodians who are really part of the fiber of the school community. When you have these people coming in, that scares the hell out of parents, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I really am, because they should be scared. And I'm gonna circle back to Chelmsford, because I want to tell you what happened up there. We lost that fight. I think it was 19 school custodians at the time. And then one day I pick up my local newspaper and I see a story, Chelmsford school custodian arrested. And it turns out this guy, the police made a routine traffic stop, and they said, "Where are you coming from?" "Well, I'm Chelmsford High School." Well, he had outstanding warrants for prescription drug crimes. But all it said was Chelmsford school custodian, which infuriated me. So I called the paper and I said, "You need to clarify, this is not a Chelmsford school custodian, this is an Aramark contract employee." And that got their interest a little bit. So we ended up getting a little follow-up story, and they pointed out some of the things that we had raised at school committee meetings, that this was going to happen, right? Then, it's been a while now, so the timeline's a little hazy for me, but not too long after that, there was another arrest. And this person was stealing petty cash, jewelry, things like that from lockers on the night shift and from teachers' desks and things like that. So we got that hit. And then I'll never forget, The reporter's name was Alana Melanson, and she called me 4 or 5 months later, and she said, Jim, I'm calling to make your day. There was another arrest of a Chelmsford school custodian. This person was stealing prescription drugs out of the locked cabinet in the nurse's office. So this went on and on and on. I actually got a Word file with about 10 links, and I call it Chelmsford headlines, that we pull out. And I talked to you about Jay Lang, the superintendent up there. So I can't tell you how many times we've used Chelmsford, and we used it in Duxbury, to defeat these initiatives. But we had a huge one up in Nashua, 100 school custodians in Nashua, and it went on for a year. It kept going on the back burner, then back on. And Jay Lang, that superintendent, he makes calls. He made calls into Duxbury for me too to say, don't do this. He called the Nashua school board members, or I gave them his cell phone number, and they called him. And when we finally won that vote, the chair of the school committee who was driving it, I still got the tape, the YouTube. She said, what did it for me was the call from the Chelmsford superintendent. He said, you will live to regret this. Do not do it. So that's what I mean when I say even on losses, we leverage that strength. And I mean, I love these fights. I hate that our members have to go through it. But for me, there is nothing more personally and professionally gratifying than to win one of these fights. And that's why we love it so much.
I will say that this fight, for me, has been the absolute highlight of my year so far. So I echo that too. It's
I'll never forget it.
among the most gratifying things I do.
Yeah.
So.
You know, years later after Nashua, I was up canvassing for somebody who the hell knows now. And I was going through this apartment complex, and a guy yelled out, "Hey Jim!" And I didn't know the guy. You know, there was 100 of these custodians, and he introduced himself, and he had his kids with him, and he said, "This is the man who saved your father's job." I will never ever forget that. Absolutely fantastic. Talk about something that puts wind in your sails, you know.
Well, so Jason, let's come back to you. One of the things I was really impressed with throughout this campaign was your ability to turn out folks from your local to come to Duxbury for events, which always seem to be in the pouring rain.
Yes,
I don't know
it's
why
actually,
that
we have
But you have some photos.
We have a
you
photo
see in the
of-
pouring rain.
me with a comically small umbrella.
Yes. So none of those folks work in Duxbury. None of those folks' jobs were on the line. How did you get people to participate and engage in this?
Well, what I did is, so I did a call out to my board, and I did speak to, I have, in my town where I work, I do have some people I work with that I try to speak to as well. And I just said, especially for me as a custodian, some of it, do we have any custodians in here? Okay, so you guys know, we're all a little crazy, and we're all, like, when stuff like this happens, it is like high school. Guess what's going on, Duxbury. So I'm like, hey, you guys wanna be involved in making this not possibly happen? Saturday at noon, there was an election, right?
There's an election.
And a science fair across
that
the
we hit
street.
Across the street.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just called guys up, and like I said earlier about my board, you know, I have a great board, I really do, and I have guys on my board which I know, like, I could call them up and be like, let's spend the day down in Duxbury. It's gonna be great. And then it poured like ice rain, but which is fine. All the more to drive me to try to smash this because I was wet and tired and cold. But yeah. So like, you know, that's one of the things you do as a president. I don't know if there's, you know, with your boards, just, you know, more than just having the monthly meeting, it's a relationship. And I think we have a pretty great relationship, and it's like I would do the same for them. I'm getting information relayed to me, I'm relaying it out to them, and then we just kind of do what we can.
Great. So Diane, let's come back to you. I think one of the really important factors in this victory was the very strong support of the local teachers union. They immediately took a position against the privatization. What else did they do to support you?
They sent a letter to the superintendent, the school board, I started a petition, they signed that, they were at the rallies, they were coming out fighting for us,
They stepped up.
yep.
Did you have a pre-existing relationship with the local teachers union president, or was that something you built through the campaign?
No, Nora Hughes, I've known her for the past 19 years that I've worked there, so I'm always about building bridges with the public, you know, give a smile, you get a smile, you give, you get back, and I think it works, so in the service industry, it's super important.
Yeah, so I would say for those of you who are in municipalities, it is important to have relationships with the presidents of other unions in the community, if only just for this reason, because you really may need them. Were there any other local unions that really supported you the way the teachers did?
No.
Yes, but the teachers were key.
Yes.
I mean, they were really key. And so when I talked about the solidarity strategy, you know, we got a lot of support from the local teachers union. We also got a lot of support from Local 1700, and we got support from other AFSCME locals really across eastern Massachusetts. But we didn't get everybody. But that teachers union support, that was key. So the campaign team really wants to analyze the situation and say, who do we really need here? And with custodians, you really need the teachers. You really need the teachers to be with you. If you were talking about dispatchers, who would you really want there? You'd want the police and fire unions with you. So you want to think not just about any and everybody, but who strategically would really be able to help us here. So speaking of solidarity, Jim, let's talk about the AFL-CIO. How difficult is it to get their support in these fights?
Not difficult at all. Not that this matters, but we have 5 seats on the AFL-CIO Executive Board. We're also very active in the Central Labor Council, but they'd help anyway. They're great. And I just want to say before I forget, the teachers were absolutely essential in Nashua too. I remember the first school committee meeting, the first 15 speakers were teachers that got up in our favor, and they took the vote to privatize the day after the filing deadline to run for school committee. The teachers put together a slate of write-in candidates for us, and they came up short that time, but the next time around we picked off 2 on the school committee. Those write-in candidates were on the ballot the next time around. We won.
That is really interesting. Like even though they failed in the attempt to take any of these people out, they caused pain for those school committee members, because now they had to run a campaign, which I can guarantee you they were not happy about. So.
But we need the AFL-CIO in order to reach all union households in a particular city or town. They have the lists that they send to us. And I'll give you another example of where they were fantastic. Unfortunately, it was another loss, but still we got some gratification out of it. Saugus did our school custodians 4 or 5 years ago, and they did all the information was in our favor, and they still went ahead and did it. It was about cutting benefits, saving money by cutting benefits. So we lost, that was a 5-member school committee, and we lost 3-2 on that. And it was coming up on election, and they had challenges because of this. And we went to the North Shore Labor Council, and they hadn't endorsed in that race because none of the challenges reached out for endorsement. But literally, like within 48 hours, we got them to write a letter saying, we're not endorsing in this race, but here are the 3 people you definitely shouldn't vote for on there. And all 3 of them lost. We kicked all 3 of them out in that election. And let me tell you something, some of those challenges were a little nuts, right? There was one guy I remember, he had been arrested because he got in a fight with a constituent, and he hit the guy literally with a frozen cod fish. But,
That is so Massachusetts.
We were like, we don't care. We just want to punish these 3 people and send a message that happens. And I'll tell you, we did the same thing with Kim Driscoll too. You know, she ended up the lieutenant governor nominee we endorsed Maura Healy. Now, they've run, it's one vote for the two of them. You don't have to endorse them separately. But we get a call, are you guys gonna do a formal endorsement of Kim now too? And we said, no, we're not. And when we printed those t-shirts, asked me for Maura Healy, it just said Maura Healy. It didn't say Kim Driscoll, because we don't forget, we cannot forget, we have to hold these people accountable forever, if anything, to turn them into a cautionary tale, so we can beat another fight down the road.
So Diane, you've said already that your members were really scared when they heard about this and feeling pretty pessimistic. How do you feel like you got folks to the point where they were willing to fight back?
I tried to stay super positive. When they were like, no, we don't want to make them mad. I'm like, this is your job. You've got to fight. If you fight, you win. If you sit there, don't do anything, you're not going to win. Let's fight. So, and then we made a pact because they were talking about offering us jobs. And jobs. So we made a pact among all of us that we were going to walk out. We weren't taking, nobody was taking their, their handout, their.
Oh, I didn't know about that. That's
Yes.
awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. That's very solidarity-ish.
Yes.
So we did a number of events
Yeah.
throughout this campaign, again, all in the pouring rain. Did your members turn out for those?
Yes.
I saw them. Was there a point during the campaign where you felt like your members started to think, maybe we can win?
Sure, when Jason showed up with his guys, when we had our committee, the team, and I would tell them about our meetings all the time, yeah, they started turning, they had some confidence, yeah.
So, solidarity is really what made people feel like, oh, maybe we can win, we're not in this alone. And I will tell you, all campaigns are won and lost on morale. And so this is part of the reason why solidarity is so incredibly important, is because it helps the people who are in the fight feel like, oh, maybe we can win this, maybe we're not alone. Jim, I'm going to come back to you. I know you sent a bunch of materials, numerous times actually, to members of the Duxbury School Committee, and you asked to meet with each of them. Did any of them meet with you?
No.
They did not. And is that typical? Do they often dodge you like that?
Yeah, pretty typical.
Yeah.
On the municipal level, unless you have a strong ally in there that's opposing this, they'll talk to you, kind of strategize. We had that in Saugus. We had, even though we lost it, we had the two that were kind of feeding us information. But it's still important to do, if anything, to be able to go into the meeting like we did in Duxbury and say, I emailed everybody, I wanted to talk, and never heard back from anyone. You go on record, and then you can use that as a talking point that, like, we tried to sit down with these people, we tried to explain things, and we didn't get an answer. That's why we get, 35 people outside with picket signs.
Yeah. So despite the fact that none of them would talk to you, we still won.
Yep.
Why do you think that was?
Because of everything that we did in partnership. This was really, if Chelmsford is an example of why you shouldn't, losing a fight, this is a classic example of winning a fight. Everybody pitched in down there.
Danielle was scared shitless.
Danielle is the superintendent.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were very uncomfortable. You could tell that they were the type of board that isn't necessarily used to opposition. And when they saw opposition tenfold with signs and people literally being like, calling you out, you could, like, we had a meeting, there's some photos here in the school where the superintendent sat there, and I'll never forget this. She was sitting there, and we were in the back, and it was almost like her neck was broken. She wouldn't look over at us. And she just looked straight ahead the whole time. And we're all like,
It's kind of a Trump deal.
yeah, right, yeah. But they wouldn't, you could see eye contact not being made. They were uncomfortable.
Really
Uncomfortable. And probably not too happy either.
No, definitely not happy.
Yeah.
That was not a happy group.
I don't think that group was even used to having people show up.
No.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
completely flummoxed.
Yeah, and I will say this too, another thing that did happen that I think kind of turned like a page, if you remember the school committee meeting we were at, they were borderline not acknowledging us. Remember, they were kind of weird about the minutes talking.
Yeah, yeah.
So one thing I just came to my mind, if you guys remember, they had 2 student liaisons.
Oh, right.
Oh,
I
that's
forgot
right. That
about
was
this.
great.
Who were 2 high school kids who we talked to a little bit, and they would come in and they're basically like, what's going on at, Duxbury High today? And they're like, the hockey team won 3-0 and raised $200. And then in the end, one of the kids was like, and we stand with our custodians, and like totally off script, like didn't even, and you could just see the superintendent's
Steam coming
ears
out of her
like were
ears.
so red, and like she so like she kind of went like this a little bit, like she looked a little at us, but you could tell that was just like.
That was
And
unexpected.
those were hand-picked students by
They were her
her.
handpicked
Yeah.
students.
Yeah.
And they didn't even tell us they were gonna do it.
No, we didn't ask them.
The kid was just like, I just want to close out by saying we're proud of all the custodians and we support them keeping their jobs to keep the bill. And we were just like, what? Like I was like, whoa, like.
Yeah.
I
And
forgot
you
about
just
that.
knew too that she reviewed their remarks before,
Yeah,
except for that.
Yeah, because they were reading like a script.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
like, we sold
Yeah.
like 10 cupcakes and raised
Yeah,
$8
yeah,
this
yeah.
year. And then all of a sudden he's like, and looked at her and was like, we support, and I was just like whoa, because that was completely off.
Yeah.
Off there. We
Yeah, it
didn't
was
think they were
really-
doing
That
that.
was spontaneous.
Oh,
About
it
this
really
generation
was.
of kids.
Yeah.
So I do want to just come back to this idea of, these people wouldn't meet with Jim, and yet we still won. Jim is an excellent lobbyist. He does a great job for you guys, but it is not. What I'm trying to say is the most effective lobbyists for you is guess who? You. And Jim is the first person to say that. Like, you would be the first person to
Absolutely.
agree with that. Like, he can build relationships with legislators and elected officials. He can pull together materials. He can set up appointments. But if you're with him, he's got really powerful weapons at his disposal. And in this case, they wouldn't even talk to him, and they still caved. So again, member engagement is really the key. So Jason, I'm going to come back to you. Looking back, what do you think was the most important thing about this campaign? What has really stuck with you?
Well, just support of a community. Like we're doing the same job, and we understand. Like I know, like I'm not like. Sometimes when I have to call people and I mention I'm the president of the local, I believe they might envision a man at a gold desk talking on a phone and eating caviar or shrimp or something. Like I know I'm a janitor, guys. Like yeah, with a pinky ring gold. I work weekends. I did 20 hours last weekend redoing floors. Like I do the same thing, and I think there's a sense of that might be lost, but I believe we're really trying hard to bring it back. That like I do the same work. And I'm here to do everything like it sounds kind of like Disney movie-ish. I want to do everything I can to make sure they keep their jobs, and then I want to do everything I can to make sure they get the most money they can get out of that job. Like I really want that, and I think I project that enough that I can, I was talking when we did one of the reach outs out of voting. That for some of you guys that don't know the South Shore, Duxbury is neon red, bright red politically. Like it's just not even a question. It's what it is. I was walking up to dudes wearing Trump hats and just saying, hey, do you realize this is going on? And by the end, I felt that we might not agree politically, well, we don't agree politically, but I believe at the end, we kind of had a common ground. I'm like, this is the community. These people live in this community. This is your neighbor. This ain't somebody you don't know. They're around your kids. And like, as custodians there, you know everything in that building, and you know every kid. When I was a custodian working day shifts in schools, I've seen children walking down the hallway, and I could tell something was wrong right away just because I could tell, because I know the kids. You don't get that. You don't get that with random people in there. They don't care. They're not getting paid. You don't get that. And that was the thing I really tried to push, and I think that really helped with us, because I was getting people coming up to me, like at this one, again, with the comically small umbrella photo, that they were like, I'm a member of the Ironworkers, or I'm a member of this, and I'm going to go and I'm going to tell, my neighbor who show up to this meeting and this comes to a vote. If you remember, we had more plans coming down the line. We were going to show up at every school sporting event, every I say HYA because it's Hanover, but every in-town Duxbury youth sporting event, and we were just going to just talk and hammer that, give them flyers. And I believe putting a face to the people, like she's one of the people. She's right here. She can tell you this isn't made up. This is very real. And I think that was a big part of it for us.
Jim and I were talking a little earlier. This opposition to privatization doesn't really tend to be partisan.
Yeah.
Jason's right. Duxbury is a very Republican community, but people don't react in a partisan way. They react in a Well, no, I don't want random people in the school with my kids way. They react in a common sense way, in other words. So, you know, you might think, oh, well, this is really conservative, we can't win here. No, I don't really find that to be relevant. Okay, Diane, you get the last word, as you should.
Okay.
So this all happened in the spring, the vote to table or to abandon the privatization
April
attempt.
11th.
Happened in April 11th, not that she remembers.
Mhm.
What's it like in your local now? Do you feel like your members have a different sense of their own power?
Oh, absolutely, 100%, yeah. There's now, they're showing up at the meetings I have. Yeah, they're participating, yep,
That's great.
yep.
And then let me ask you the same thing I asked Jason. What has stuck with you? What do you really take away
The
from
solidarity,
this?
the fact that we saved their jobs, just all the people that came out, it was heartwarming. Even if we had lost, you can't even imagine what that means, the people supporting you, all those people supporting us, yeah, it was something.
Okay, that's actually a good way to end it.
Sorry.
So,
It was something, it was stressful and it was something.
yeah. Okay, so let's open it up to questions from you all. Wendy.
I have a question, I just have a comment. I want to thank all of you for your work, but I especially want to thank you and all the custodians, because hearing her say that people treat them like shit pisses me off, because I'm just clerical staff, and I understand what you're saying, because as a peon and clerical staff, in higher ed, the professors think that they're fucking awesome, and they treat us like shit, so I get it, but, you do the job I don't wanna fucking do, and I want you to get paid, because that shit sucks,
Yes.
so thank you for that.
Wendy. Yeah.
How do you bring back, try to bring privatized?
I'll let Jim handle that.
It's pretty simple, actually. In Chelmsford, the contractor had screwed up so much that they were able to just terminate the contract midterm.
The reason I ask, sorry to interrupt, I work in Swampscott, and we've been privatized somewhat since early 90s. And then this past summer, they took away all our night cleaners. So we went from a staff of 15, these guys were slowly retiring and leaving, they never filled the positions. And we're down to like maybe 9, 10 people now. And we have a cleaning company at the high school, middle school, and now we have the elementary school. And it's like you're saying, they just come in, work their 3 hours, don't care, and I'm left picking up the mess. And it's me, the other day guy, my night guy, and we're running around picking up after people that have been there a couple of weeks. It's just like they don't have respect, they don't have pride. And I grew up in the town, I got pride for the kids, pride for the families I know. It's, I want the jobs back. How do I go about getting that back?
I think we should probably have a longer conversation afterwards, but one of the things that could be done, especially if there's complaints with, if the town isn't getting what they think they should be getting out of the private contractor, a proposal could originate to say, you know, to the town manager, or eventually to the select board down there, that you know, we've got a proposal here to bring this back in house, and here's what we think it would cost to adequately staff. And one of the arguments we use against privatization is, especially on custodians, is it never takes into account all the extra things that you do. A lot of you guys are, you know, skilled tradesmen. You can take care of a small plumbing or electrical issue or something on the spot, as opposed to bringing somebody else in. You're not going to get that out of an Aramark or a Sodexo cleaning crew. Virtually every custodian I've ever met, they consider themselves part of the security system of the school. I remember, again, I keep going back to Nashua, but there was one guy every night before he went home, and he was a coach. He would drive around his school building to make sure there were no open windows, nothing, no shenanigans going on. But you can bring forward a proposal, and we can, our international, we've got a great research department. They could actually help you put together a cost proposal. There was a college out in Western Mass, I think it was Berkshire Community College, many years ago. They had replaced their custodians, and they brought it back in-house, and it originated with a proposal that we crafted with help from the international union, like a true cost analysis that, in I think step one would be put an information request in and say, what are you paying these contractors right now, right? So let's know what we're up against here. And even if it was cheaper than bringing it back in-house, then you start talking about all the value-added stuff that you have.
Well, we just had a massive layoff this past year for the whole teachers, other departments, one maintenance guy, and the town had a big vote, and one night, but then they had a revote, and we lost the voting again that night. So
Was that an override vote?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
we were asking for an additional $500,000 to get the budget back. And the first night they approved it, and the second night they went behind the back, and they changed the vote.
Yeah.
So we lost, we ended up losing the cuts. And that wasn't the reason to privatize, but teachers and everyone else lost some jobs. So I don't know if a proposal is gonna help, because they're just gonna cry, we have no money.
But again, I would go back to, okay, you got no money, but what are you paying right now for the services that you got? And I guarantee you, it's hefty. Because one of the things that never happens is people never look back. And we always say, contractors, it's the same thing. They secure the job with a lowball bid. And then after the infrastructure is lost, all the workers have gone, have moved on, those costs steadily go up over years, because they in some services more than others, that's the case. Like, if you get involved, trash removal was a big privatization thing 20 years ago, and once the cities in town sold off their garbage trucks, I mean, that's a big capital investment for a city to make down the road. Now it's happening with school bus companies, right? Because what happened with the trash removal, there was a couple of big private trash contractors. They all got kind of swallowed up, and they're all into, I can't even remember the name of the company right now, but they basically corner the market in pretty much every state.
Republic, or
Waste management's it. So it's not like there wouldn't be a huge capital investment, although chances are these contractors are probably using school equipment. They're probably using, right? Yeah.
Machines and whatever.
Yeah. But we should have a longer conversation about this. But I would start, and I'll find out who your staff rep is down there. I would start with just putting in an information request, public information request. We want every nickel you're spending.
But we had a former staff rep, and probably serving time right now. And
Yeah. But what,
Who do you have now? Charlie? Okay.
yeah,
So,
good, all right. I'll get with Charlie.
Other questions?
thank you
Yeah,
very
hi.
much.
Yeah.
So
My
this is
pleasure.
a combination question, probably for Diane and Jason. And with the package you had of your fellow employees to not take on those jobs, and I guess for Jason,
Yeah.
how do you deal with other local members who decided they wanted to apply for those jobs, may have potentially wanted to apply for those jobs?
Well, to be honest with you, I can't stop them.
Right.
No.
But I think what happened, I think the thing for us is, like, the thing for a lot of people, the very basic, straightforward conversation is money. Like, you are not gonna make, I'll be very honest with my town, we do all right. You're not making that. You're not making that money. And then also you can push the job security issue too. You no longer have, like, they can come to you Monday and go, you don't work here anymore. Like, I can't, like, I have this issue, I have this conversation a lot. Like, I'm 15 years in, I know that's long, but it's also not long. I have this conversation a lot. I came from a factory before I started working for the town. And sometimes I get guys that are like, this is unfair, and want to remind them quickly that I worked in a factory where on Friday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon they went, "Hey, you working tomorrow?" And know what my recourse was? Okay, because if you don't want to come in, it's a sick day. If you don't have sick time, it doesn't matter. You're working tomorrow. I'm like, you just got to push. Like, it's a hard sell sometimes. Everyone's so scrambled right now. I totally get it, but you got to push. Like, you have benefits. You have this. You have.
Yeah.
People from all over the state showed up to this meeting. Like, a lot of staff showed up to this meeting. It's
It's worth fighting.
it's worth fighting for, unless you know.
Being an at-will employee is
It's not fun.
It's not fun.
It's situations where you see where, and this is what maybe I'm missing it, is that where you have your bargaining unit members who decide they want to make a little extra cash on the side, apply for those jobs in a part-time status.
I would have an issue. I mean, not that I'm allowed to have an issue with that, but
Oh, yeah.
I would strongly recommend that they do not do that.
I mean,
Okay,
Jason's
that's
right.
something, and I know it's a
You
thing you
can't
have to deal
stop
with.
them,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like you can't stop them, but you can be honest with them, both about the impact on them and the impact on their coworkers, and the ways in which they're letting their coworkers down. Like, you can say that.
I also believe my conversation with them might be a little more like colorful than one I would have in a classroom of
100%.
of a panel classroom. There might be some more adjectives that I can use in a face-to-face conversation. Not like, not in the threatening way, but I'd be like, I would highly recommend that they don't do that because the damage is bigger than just them making a couple extra bucks an hour.
You don't take them up on the wood pile.
Yeah. We go behind the shed. I'm just kidding.
It's kind of hard to go from
Before
what we were
this
making.
completely deteriorates.
Yeah.
At best, you would get $15 an hour part-time, no benefits.
Yeah, and I know.
Zero.
Yeah, and I know this is an issue everywhere. I know this is mostly Massachusetts people in here, for the so we all know the cost of living in this state is unbelievable, unbelievable. So like,
Catching up, so.
yeah. So, I don't understand how anyone can live on, they probably wouldn't even give you 40. It would be like 35, 32 at $15 an hour. I mean, you might as well just collect cans at that point. Like that. I mean, yeah, it's just, you really got to push that idea because I think a lot of people, we're so fractured right now. This might be semi-off topic, so I'm not going to go too far. But we're so fractured right now. People are so steadfast. But you got to understand, like, you're hurting everyone, not just you hurt everyone, and it's
Including yourself.
including yourself.
Other questions for the panel? Yeah.
There was one other observation, and that was after the picketing the first time. They decided they changed their meeting spot and kept it secret for quite a while.
Yes. Yeah, we forgot to bring that up.
Yes, and
That's right. Jeez.
and I showed up, that was the one at the library, and I showed up early to do advance, and there was a cop. They called the cops, and they'd hired a detail
Yeah.
from the sheriff's department to come protect them from the union thugs.
The union.
It was a great moment. It was a great moment
Yeah.
because
Yeah, I
he
heard
was
that
a
from-
sheriff. He wasn't a police officer, he was a sheriff, and he was completely on our side.
Yeah,
It was
And
really very funny.
And those are town funds well spent.
Yeah,
Oh yes,
right.
well spent
And
town funds.
the other thing they did too, which was kind of shady, was like, the meeting which we had the big turnout was at night on a weeknight. And then they were like, hey, our next meeting's at 11 a.m. on like a
Yes,
Tuesday
they had an
at this
11
super secret location that we're going to tell you the day before. And we're like,
Super
come
secret
on.
location.
So I'm like, hey, I'm a union guy. I have days off. I think I might have, I might have called in sick that day. But I was like, I won't be in tomorrow. Like, I'm going to go because, we were going to show up for this. Yeah.
Any other questions for the panel? Tim?
So, more of a comment on a couple things that Diane said that really struck me that I think that everyone could be working on already. One, I think you said that you heard about this because you were watching the school committee meeting and you heard that they were asking for authorization to put it out for bid. And so I think that it's important for everyone to monitor what happens at the school committee, the town council, board of trustees, whatever your governing body is. Because if you didn't know until after the bids had gone out and or the RFP had gone out and bids had come in, I mean, that's a much shorter time period to fight back, right?
Exactly.
So I think monitoring what's happening is really important. And then the other thing you mentioned that you already had a relationship with the teachers. And so I think having, whatever the other employee groups are, or whoever the decision makers are, I think it's important to have those relationships already. So, rather than reaching out to someone for the first time when we're in a crisis trying to stop something, if there's a relationship that's already there, people that I think it makes it that much easier to do. So I think those are two really good things that you did there.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah.
How long did the whole process take from like when you guys found out to like when you finished? And what happens if they had bid it out in that process? Like,
So Diane first heard in December.
Yep.
The campaign team first met in January, I think. The school committee voted to abandon the privatization attempt on April 11th. So it was about a 4 or 5 month campaign from start to finish. And then what was the second question?
like, okay, so it took 5 months, right? But what happens if they came in and then they were like, all right, like, too much, you guys are.
What do you mean? Too much?
Yeah,
We're gonna do it
Like
anyway?
the bid already came in, like,
They
and there
already
was no
started taking
time
bids.
to like get all that campaign.
I
and
see,
stuff done.
I see. Well, this is why I had 2 slides that said, tell your staff rep as soon as you hear about it, because that kind of thing has happened. I mean, when I was at AFSCME 15 years ago, I remember a privatization campaign where the bids had come in and they were on the cusp of a final vote before we even found out about it. And it is very hard to win in that circumstance. So that's why you want to let people. We would fight it still. Like I can tell you right now, Jim would be all over it, like white on rice. But the more time we have, the more time we have to get it up and running, and the better chance of success we have.
Well, if I also remember, I believe, didn't they take bids?
Yeah.
They did. Oh, they got bids.
They did.
Yeah.
They had companies come in and do a tour, and
They
we
had
used
a tour.
our crack
they
staff
accepted bids. Yeah.
to get the names on every truck that was out there, and then we researched
I sat
every
in the
truck.
parking lot.
Then we researched the Jim.
And then we got the bids.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
actually
we did
got the
request
bids
the
through,
bids.
Yeah.
and there was at least one of them that came in higher
Yeah, it was like
than the
Yeah.
in-house
Yes.
cost
Than the
to
costs.
do it.
Yeah.
And then there was one that was
Really
ridiculously low.
Yeah.
And basically the bids reflected everything that we said was going to happen. Somebody's gonna come in and either give you a crew of 30 part-time positions with no benefits, or they're gonna come in too high, or they're gonna come in with full-time positions that are low, which means the wages they're paying are poverty wages on them.
I remember the names coming across, and we were like Googling the names and like
Yeah.
looking up like finding out who like the CEO. We found like one of the CEOs like Facebook's. Remember,
Right.
they were looking
Yeah.
at his Facebook to see what he was posting about. So like we were, I believe.
Yeah, but they got
One
us.
of them actually asked us for the union contract.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I got it.
Yeah, we'll get that to you in a
Jason
minute.
got
Yeah.
this email that said, could you share with me your union contract?
Oh, sure.
And so Jason emailed me and said, what should I do? And I'm like, just don't.
I still maintain we should have sent them a doctored contract. $20 an hour.
I wanted to respond with
That'd be a no, John.
a very like wise snarky remark, but it was better not to respond.
Yes, Sheila, saner heads prevailed.
Send them
And
an
Sheila said,
attachment with a
just
virus.
don't answer. So, but they got
just a
as
word
far
note.
as accepting bids. I mean, they got pretty far down this road on this. Yeah, Michael.
Question for Jason. Was this in between contracts? Was it about to expire
For you guys.
It was.
So this
We
bid
just
didn't-
actually ratified our contract. We just finished, and we did good. We
Yeah,
did
but they
really well.
were out of
Yes.
contract, yep.
Yes.
I was
Wendy?
just curious.
I was just gonna tack on to what Jim said earlier and give a different perspective. How much fun it is to have like the Chelmsford situation end up exactly what you want them as. It's just so frustrating though that you can say that over and over and over again, and they know so much more than you, and money, and this is what we're gonna do. Because I've been on that end of it, because sometimes there actually isn't gratification in that, because sometimes it's such a bad scenario that you warned them against, that it's like, I didn't wanna be right about that.
Yeah.
Like when we were fighting LNG in our community, and when the pipeline in Merrimack Valley exploded and that happened, I got text messages and phone calls, you were right.
Yeah.
I know, this isn't what I wanted, this isn't a case where I wanted to be right, this is awful.
Yeah.
You know, it's just frustrating. Wants to say
Any
no.
other questions for our panel?
I do want to say the one quick thing too, is I do believe when we had a speaker at the final meeting. Remember the gentleman that?
Ben
Oh,
Cronin.
they do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Ben.
And then we also had a member of the school board who used his Google abilities to look up Jim. I mean, I don't know if you
Yeah.
can speak about
Said
that.
very nasty things
He had
about
to,
Jim.
he had to get his little pop in, but in the end we still won, so he can be as mad as he wants.
Yeah, I get the last one.
I'm gonna say that
That was-
didn't end well for him.
That was-
That didn't go well.
First time I've ever seen Jim's head turn completely red.
Yeah, he just Googled some like basic entry level facts and tried to spin it, and I'm gonna be honest, he looked like a straight clown doing it, but
That was Matt Gambino, and his whole thing was, we were just looking.
We were just-
weren't-
Yeah.
Okay.
We just took actual bids, no
Yeah.
big.
And I think I said I
You're gonna
never
lose your
saw a
livelihood.
privatization proposal that didn't begin as exploratory.
Yeah.
That's the
Exactly.
first thing they say. We're
Hey.
just looking at this.
Just
We're just
looking.
looking at it.
Hey guys, we were just
Go
gonna
to
take your
sleep for a
jobs.
couple of months until we choose a bidder.
We just want to take your jobs and livelihoods away. JK.
Yeah,
But do you remember the signs we used?
yes.
Yeah, we have photos.
We do have some photos
Yeah.
up here if people want to look,
Yeah.
so. Any other questions?
When is Gambino up for re-election too? We gotta.
It should be
I
soon.
wanted
He
to,
was just
you know,
in on our
let the superintendent
negotiations.
know that we weren't here, if you want our job, we're
Yeah.
coming
The
for
rest
your
of them-
job. So I
the rest
sat
of
back
them
and
were
thought for a
big
minute, and give us all the Godfather, take the gun, leave the cannolis.
Yeah.
We need a sign that says, fire the superintendent, keep the custodians.
Yeah.
So the first time I exposed that sign, the first person I walked through the door was this woman I didn't know, and I turned to Jason, who's that? He goes,
That's
that's
the
super.
super.
Yeah.
So I immediately followed her into the room and just kept flopping my sign and falling around until she sat down, and I stood behind her flopping my sign. You just gotta, you know, like, you gotta rattle the cage.
I bet she'd like a picture
Hey,
to
wanna send-
memorialize.
We can send her one if you want.
I mean, I will say, this might be a good way to close. This proposal was driven by the superintendent, who was telling the school committee, this is what we have to do, and the school committee was like, okay, that seems okay. And so what we did was make it very unpleasant for the members of the school committee. And you could sort of see the moment when they started to turn on her. Like, why are you, what are you doing to me here? Why did you put me in this position? Stop putting me in this position. And that was the moment, I think, when it really began to turn, so.
I'd have to say that probably the winningest part of the campaign is the people power. And when
Yeah.
you get the community, not even the people whose jobs are threatened, but the people in the community who are standing
Yes.
behind them saying, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And the best way to win those over, like you were saying, like you have a mixed bag of people. How do you reach them
Yeah.
when it's not their jobs and maybe they're conservative or whatever?
Yeah.
And in past campaigns, just having one-on-one conversations and finding out what their priorities are and hearing them out instead of pushing your agenda on them, and then going back and going, okay, how does this hurt their priorities, and then adding that to your campaign.
Yeah. And like, I just want to say my last thing is too, I think this was a case with some of you guys, if you work in the bigger, if you have a local that's bigger, I really do believe this was a case or a type of situation where the people in power in that town thought they could bully people they thought were less than them. And they found out real quick that that's not how it works. And it'll never work that way ever again. Right?
Tiger?
Yeah, I just wanna say one thing too, is strength in numbers, and that's what you have with your union. They thought they were gonna be up against 27 custodians, they didn't realize that they had 45,000 other people they were about to piss off. So remember that though, and you have a situation that comes up like this, treat every one of them as if that was gonna be your job. It makes it a lot easier to go to an event and support those when they need you. Sometimes life's gonna happen, and you can't make everything that gets out there. But just remember that treat what you hear, privatization, and we need people to show up. That's your job, not their job. Makes a hell of a big difference when you're gonna get there. And like Jason said, they did sneaky meetings at 11 o'clock in the morning. They picked a day when we had our executive board meeting to try
Yeah.
and have the beginning.
we're out of
piece
state.
it.
You guys
They did
are from
everything they
Hampshire.
could. And we just said, we said, fuck it, we're gonna be there. We all took time off and we all went down there.
Yeah.
We got their addresses, we got their personal phone numbers,
Yeah.
and we did every tactic we had to do. I mean, I'm still a kid from Dorchester, I may be your president, but I'm still a kid from Dorchester. And, you know, when it comes time to fight for what's right, we're gonna be there. And we're gonna be there in numbers and we're gonna be there in strength. and you guys did an impeccable job, right down to John Roberts, who should be sitting up there with you.
Yeah.
John Roberts, a staff rep, got ahead of all this, and he said, you would have no idea what's going on. And you did an incredible job. Well, those jobs are on the line.
Yeah.
You kept your composure, and you just let us run the ship and right the ship. Jason, you're best, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tiger.
So I want to, just one more time, say thank you to my wonderful panel, and to say to Diane and Jason, congratulations on
Thank you.
this great thing.
How you guys?
Thank you all for coming. Make sure you sign the signage.
You have to check into it.
This one's full. Is there